to shoot somebody with their 4-year-old child right there. I mean, I get up here ad nauseum and tell you about how I'm shocked at how people treat other people. This just goes beyond that. It's horrible.
We've seen a lot of horrible cases here at Law&Crime, especially when children are in the mix. And this case is a prime example.
Deputies arrive and find 24-year-old Colby Vinson deceased with a gunshot wound. Next to the victim is his 4-year-old child.
I'm Elizabeth Millner with Law&Crime. A Florida mom learns her fate years after having her child's father killed right in front of their daughter. All of this because a judge awarded the child's father split custody. And as you saw from that clip, she wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. Instead, prosecutors say she had someone else do it.
Let's go back to March 19th of 2023. That's when deputies got a call of a shooting in Santa Rosa County, Florida.
We got dispatched to Kyle Grand Apartments in Navarre in reference to a shooting. Deputies arrive and find 24-year-old Colby Vinson deceased with a gunshot wound. Next to the victim is his 4-year-old child. Detectives hit the ground running and develop a suspect, Jason Curtis from Cullman, Alabama, 53-year-old.
So why would Jason Curtis shoot Colby Vinson? Well, there's a person missing from that puzzle. So Jason is the former stepfather of Rachiel Moore. Colby Vinson used to be in a relationship with Rachiel, and together they had a daughter. Things soured. Then there was a huge fight of custody over her. But after Colby was shot and killed, investigators pieced together things pretty quickly.
Detectives interview the mother of the child, Rachiel Moore, and after that interview, she's arrested for tampering with evidence and accessory after the fact to first-degree murder. Detectives obtain a warrant for Curtis for first-degree premeditated murder. Cullman County Sheriff's Office in Alabama arrests him on that warrant and execute a search warrant on his vehicle and recover what we believe to be the murder weapon and a handwritten note that had the victim's physical description, his vehicle description, home address, and work address. Both suspects' phones are being examined as we speak, and we believe there will be more charges pending and possibly more arrests as well. The Santa Rosa County Major Crimes Unit solved this case within 24 hours, and we must thank the Cullman, Alabama Sheriff's Office for their help with this incident.
So you have a note with Colby's address, physical description, all of that. So what exactly happened? Well, prior to Colby's murder, he and Rachiel were in a custody battle for about a year. Then the judge ruled in Colby's favor, granting him 50-50 custody over their daughter. Deputies say Rachiel and her family weren't happy about that decision. Rachiel claimed she was concerned about Colby allegedly using drugs around their daughter. But the judge noted Rachiel didn't report any of those concerns through official channels. Instead, she cut off contact between Colby and their daughter for 10 months without even getting a court order. So it seems she took matters into her own hands. After the hearing where Colby was awarded 50-50 custody, Jason Curtis reportedly sent Rachiel pictures of knives and guns through Facebook Messenger. Rachiel surprisingly thanked him, saying that made her feel better, but later deleted the Messenger app because it looked bad, which it did, given what happened next. Investigators say Rachiel had communicated with Jason the entire week before Colby's murder. And as you heard from the sheriff's office, Jason decided to drive all the way from Alabama to Florida just to kill Colby. The night before the murder, investigators say Jason called Rachiel at 10 p.m. that night and said she had nothing to worry about. Rachiel claimed she had no idea her stepfather, or ex-stepfather, would actually harm Colby. But according to the report by deputies, Jason asked his stepdaughter what weapon she wanted him to use, and she said whatever is easiest to carry. She even was planning to chip in $50 for his gas to make the trek from Alabama to Florida. Again, claiming she didn't think that he would actually go through with it. So March 19th comes. Colby is near his and Rachiel's 4-year-old daughter unloading groceries, and he's gruesomely murdered in front of his daughter. After the murder, deputies see Jason called Rachiel and said it was done and he needed to go on the run. Obviously, he didn't get too far. He was caught in Alabama. Then deputies interviewed Rachiel about her ex's murder, and she claimed she had no idea who would kill him. But who else really could have had the motive to have Colby killed? Now, like the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office said at the time, they solved the case pretty quickly, but didn't mince words when it came to Jason Curtis's involvement in Colby's murder.
What a human piece of trash. I mean, to shoot somebody with their 4-year-old child right there. I mean, I get up here ad nauseum and tell you about how I'm shocked at how people treat other people. This just goes beyond that. It's horrible. Horrible.
So all that happened in March of 2023. By May of 2024, Jason Curtis was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, leaving just Rachiel to stand trial. In April of this year, so a little more than 2 years after Colby was shot and killed by Jason, Rachiel was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, plus tampering with evidence. And she was immediately sentenced following her conviction. So did she face the same fate as her former stepdad? Yeah, she did. Life in prison with no chance of parole. So now, in a terrible twist, Colby and Rachiel's daughter, who could have grown up with both parents by her side, now is forced to grow up without any of her parents.
So let's break all of this down with family law attorney Randy Kessler. Randy, thank you so much for joining me today. You know, I've always heard that custody battles can lead to some of the nastiest fights between parents. And here in this case, it all kind of culminated in a horrific murder in front of the child that the parents were fighting over in the first place. What's your reaction to this case?
You know, I hate hearing it, and we're hearing it more and more, right? You guys are covering stories like this over and over. It's, you know, we see the feelings, we see the emotions. This one, though, really sort of gets me because it's not like a mom lost custody and is never going to see her child again. This was just, I have to share custody with the dad. It also sort of gets me because it doesn't seem like she went out and really said, I want to make sure he dies. It sounds like, you know, stepdad offered and she didn't object, and a sort of a subtle, you know, evolution. So this is a strange one. It's a tough one, but, you know, it's on her. Jury found her guilty. She's guilty.
What do you make of Rachiel's ex-stepfather and his role in this whole murder? Do you think that she may have just seemed like she was joking around from her end and maybe he just took it too far? But what do you make of just his entire role in this case?
Well, there's so much there. Obviously, he's the baddest of the two, right? He's the one who actually did it. He's the one who's maybe suggested it. You know, maybe she should have stopped. Maybe she should have cut him off. But shame on him. I wish he could be punished a lot worse than her, but they're both going to be punished pretty harshly. Just seems like almost like a grooming situation, or you know, here's my stepdaughter, and I don't want to see her hurt. I don't want to see her angry. What can I do to make her life better? What can I do to appease her? I'm going to go out and kill this guy. And that seems like the evolution of it, right? So he was definitely a much more influential person in the, you know, that's what I was saying earlier. It's sort of weird that I see people that actually would go out and have that feeling that if they weren't going to suffer consequences like going to jail or having to pay a criminal defense lawyer, they would want to hurt their ex-spouse, but they don't do it. This seems like, I don't know if she wanted to do it or if he just made it so easy for her that she said, yeah, I'm not getting you to do it, but I'm not really going to object. It's sort of an interesting one of these cases that we're hearing over and over.
Exactly. And now she's facing, or not even facing, now she's sentenced to the rest of her life in prison. What are your thoughts on her sentence, given that it's the exact same one as her ex-stepfather, who is also serving a life in prison sentence without the possibility of parole? So both of them are just going to be spending life in prison, no chance of parole.
Right. It sort of troubles me, right? Because they're both guilty, but he was probably more guilty or in a worse way. I didn't like what he did more than I didn't like what she did. You know, and the other side of it, which we always have to think about, and this is what makes family law and custody cases so terrible and so interesting. You know, there's this victim, right? The child who has now lost a father and a mother. And do we say, well, forget what the mother did. We still want the child to have a mother in the child's life? Can't do that. So it's just, you know, it's a whole convolution of right? But really, I do agree with you, Elizabeth, if what you're suggesting is that stepdad should be punished more than mom. I think he should. I just don't know how you punish him more other than the death penalty or, you know, and his life is shorter, right? He's older. So a life sentence for him is not as long as a life sentence for her. It just, I hope she does reform herself or is remorseful and has a relationship with the child, even from behind bars. It can happen. But the poor child.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where my mind always goes to. Exactly. The victim and the child. And, you know, if Rachiel Moore's concern this whole time was the alleged drug use from her child's father, why do you think she just didn't tell the courts that? Instead, she just cut off contact between her daughter and her daughter's father. Then a judge had to intervene. But why do you think she just didn't say, you know what, I'm afraid that this might happen if this were the case? But instead, she just took a kind of a wild, insane way out of this.
So that's a great question. It's something we hear all the time. A woman comes in and says, the father of the child's on drugs and the father of the child won't get off drugs or won't get off alcohol. What do I do? And, I have to explain the law, which is we can file a lawsuit. We can ask for an emergency hearing. Judges are busy. They may take their time. They may not get around to it for a while. Or we're going to charge you this much to file the lawsuit, and you need to pay some lawyers to do it for you. And they say, what's the other alternative? And we say, the other alternative is you just don't let them visit, and you ask for forgiveness instead of permission, which is not what I would recommend. It's not what I would advise her. But if she doesn't have money for a lawyer, or she doesn't want to wait for a judge, or she thinks it's imminent that he's going to harm the child, a lot of people say, you know what, I'm going to cut him off. And if it has to be that the judge puts me in jail for doing that, it's worth the risk because I'm so scared for my child's safety. So it's a tough situation. It sounds simple to say, oh, just go ask a judge to cut him off. But you got to find a lawyer, and you got to file a lawsuit, and you've got to get a judge who's willing to listen, and you've got to have evidence and proof. And dad's going to have his, he's going to be cleaned up. He's going to be in his church clothes when he walks into court. And you've got to convince the judge that he's not like that all the time. It's scary. And, protective moms, protective parents, they don't care what's going to happen to them. They just don't want their child to be subjected to this. So they sometimes act immediately. And sometimes we're explaining their conduct after the fact. It's a harder position for a lawyer to be in. But at least I guess mom's saving grace is for those few months, I protected my child until the court, came to its senses and listened to me. And of course, in this case, the court didn't come to its senses, right? Ultimately, the court didn't say that he shouldn't be around his child. And so maybe in hindsight, she's glad she cut him off and wishes it had never gone to court. It's a weird area of law.
And I'm surprised that all of this happened, given that I would think, and I don't have children myself, but, I would think that 50-50 custody would at least be the happy medium. Because say you take out the alleged drug use, right? And it's just two loving parents who just want to take care of their child, make sure their child grows up healthy, and a great, child into this world, all that stuff. But in terms of just, I would think the arrangement isn't that murderous, if that makes sense. Because to your point before, it's not like she was, her custody was taken away completely. Instead, it was just split down the middle. And I would think, as a young parent, maybe you would like, having a little reprieve or that type of thing. But instead, it was just, 50-50 custody all of a sudden goes to murder. What are your thoughts just on the arrangement that the judge ruled on?
So my thoughts are that neither you nor I are psychologists, unless you have a hidden PhD that I don't know about.
I don't.
So I think there's probably something more going on, right? It's not just about the fact that her child, she told the world that dad was terrible, and some court came in and said that mom was wrong. So mom's reputation, her integrity, her dignity has been offended. They don't have a good relationship, obviously, if she was okay with having him killed. So now this guy who she thought was terrible, and maybe blamed him not just for risking the child, but for some of her problems in her own life and why she's unhappy or why she can't move on. And now this guy comes away looking and smelling, like a rose, that he's an equal parent and the court recognized him. And that just didn't sit well with her. I don't know the psychology behind it, but it's more than just, I'm going to kill him so he can't be near my child. She obviously had something, some mental deficiency to be able to say, okay, kill the father of my child. So something was going on beyond just, he's going to see my child. It's a reflection on her, maybe, that some court, some higher power said, you're not the parent that should be the primary parent. You should only have equal rights with this guy who you say is a drug user. And that hit her wrong. I mean, the human mind is a terrible thing to waste. And in this case, the human mind had some issues and we don't know what they were, but I'm sure psychologists would be, I don't want to say enjoying it, but would have a field day trying to investigate this case and why she did this or why she let this happen. And I'm still not convinced she was overtly involved. I mean, I didn't see the whole trial and I don't understand everything that went on, but she's more guilty of letting it happen versus the killer who did the killing. It's just interesting. Like you said before, they're both being punished for life. And there's something that's just strange about that.
Yeah, and to your point, it was interesting that she had told police that she didn't think that it would go this far and that type of thing. But then when you add the other facts of that Jason sent her photos of knives and guns, then she deleted messages between the two of them because she thought it would look bad. And again, even when police had asked her, who do you think would do this? And she's just like, I don't know. But what are your thoughts on
for his
her?
gas. Yeah,
Exactly, paying the $50 for the gas, but it just seems like she went to a lot of lengths to cover up her role in this. What are your thoughts on just the lengths that she had went to?
So I'm not so offended by that stuff, the covering it up. That's sort of like what happens if she was really innocent, right? You play it out for you're innocent until proven guilty. If she's innocent, she didn't really try to make it happen, but she didn't stop it. I don't know if that's murder or not. But then once it happened, she's thinking it's going to look pretty bad on me. I need to distance myself. That's what human beings do. I'm going to delete text and I'm going to delete Facebook Messenger and I'm going to, disassociate myself because I don't want to be falsely accused or I don't want to, so it might be that the cover up is what convicted her, but I'm not sure that it's proof that she actually intended the murder, which you need, right? You need intent to be guilty of a crime. So I'm not as offended by the fact that she tried to cover it up because I think we're all human. People do human things to protect themselves. It might be what ultimately got her the conviction. And the right thing to do would have been to say, I'm calling the police on you and I want you to go to jail and I'm standing my ground. And of course she's torn because it's her stepfather who did this out of love for her. So, again, a psychologist would have a field day with this, but I just see it as a sad situation.
Yeah. And in terms of just the custody dispute, so even prior to the murder, in your opinion, what else could have been done differently?
So I don't know what all the facts were, and I don't have the expert's opinion, but were there psychologists that were weighing in? Was there testing? Did the guy do the testing? Did he do, usually what will happen in cases like this is the court will set up obstacles. They'll say, you've got to blow into this breathalyzer, or you've got to take this random drug test, and you've got to maybe have some supervision. And we'll have a sort of test tube period for a few months. And if you pass it all, then I'm going to understand that you're willing to stand up and not do any of these things, or that you never did them. And if you have a glitch and you can't take the test, or you don't show up for the test, or the supervisor gets a bad vibe, then I know that mom was right. So you can put a lot of safeguards in, but a lot of times it takes money, to pay a supervisor or to pay for drug testing or to pay a lawyer to ask for those things. So I don't know if all those steps were put in place to give the judge a full, thing to look at, a full clean slate. And I'll tell you, Elizabeth, judges that I talk to, they would rather try a death penalty murder case than a custody case, because death penalty, somebody probably deserved what was coming to them. But in a custody case, you got an innocent victim, and judges don't like being put on the spot to socially engineer this child's life. They're deciding how this child's going to grow up because their parents can't get along. Shame on the parents for not figuring it out. Now I'm the judge, and I've got to decide, is it 50-50? Is it 25-75? Judges don't like these, and a lot of them, it's a crapshoot. They don't have enough information to figure out what's going to be best for this child long term. They do the best they can with what they're given, and they've got 15 cases waiting in the hall they got to get to as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, I've seen some cases where people take their frustrations out even on the judge. I've seen that on, our Law&Crime's court cam. And it's just wild how just nasty these custody battles can truly get. And, as a family law attorney, we've seen a lot of cases like murder for hires, or in this instance, we have a custody dispute. But in terms of just my mind always going to why take this route as opposed to just letting it all play out. Do you have any possible answer for that? Is it just that people don't want to pay the lawyer fees? Is it that they think the court system takes too long? My question is just always, why do this instead of now you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, as opposed to just going through the necessary channels so that way you don't have to spend the rest of your life in prison?
I think, like many people, she just didn't think it through. And I think it was emotional. I think it was like a bird landed in her hand, like when the stepfather said, I'll come do this for you. I don't think, and again, I don't know, but I don't think she was the kind of person that would have said, I'm going to go out and find a hitman and pay $10,000 to have them come kill the father of my child. It sounded like it was an opportunity. Sometimes it's a crime of opportunity. We hear that where someone, burgles or rapes or, somebody because they just happen to be there and it just pops into their mind. This seemed to pop into her mind. And back to what you said about judges, there are three branches of government, right? Legislature, executive, and judicial. And who do we respect the most? Historically, it's been judges. King Solomon the Wise, when he had to judge things. Judges are who we respect. So people think judges know it all and they're the wisest and they will always get it right. And people are very disappointed. I've got clients and I've got opposing parties that are very disappointed because they see the world one way. They think this wise, judicious person is going to understand their situation and agree with them. When they don't, their world falls apart. And sounds like what happened to her. Her world just fell apart and she reacted in a horrible way. And stepdad made it easier for her to react because he facilitated it. She didn't have to pay money. He was doing it out of love for her, and just a calamity altogether. The perfect storm of situation, her anger, her frustration with the process, her fear for her child, her anger at her ex, her stepdad willing to step in and do the dirty deed, just resulted in this. I don't think this is one of those, okay, I'm mad, I'm going to calculate how I'm going to go get my revenge. I think this just all came together in a horrible way for her, and obviously for the father of the child and for the child.
Just horrible, because to your point as well too, now the young girl has to grow up without both of her parents. So again, Randy Kessler, I want to quickly thank you so much for your time today. I know you have to hop off, but before we sign you off though, is there anything else about this case that you would like to add?
Just that it's horrible. And I wish people, one of my favorite expressions is measure twice and cut once. Just think again about what your plan of action is going to be, and think about the results. If you could flash forward and do a video or a TikTok meme or an Instagram post in your head and think, after I do this, what's my world going to look like? That would solve a lot of problems. People act too fast, too quickly, too emotionally. Measure twice, cut once, and the world would be a better place.
Those are some wise words, Randy Kessler. Thank you again so much for your time today. I really appreciate your insight into this case.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Online records show Jason Curtis is currently serving his sentence in the Gulf Correctional Institution in Florida. As of this recording, it's unclear where Rachiel Moore will serve out her sentence. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.